Hey, Slater Crusaders, America is the greatest country in the world. Welcome to our latest special COVID-19 Road to Recovery. We hope today to instill a little bit of hope in what's to come. I think we'll do that here. I'm glad you're here. So the other day on the show, I want to tell you about the guests we have coming up in just a minute. But first, the other day on the show, we talked about the Wheel of Fortune, not the Pat Sajak one, the one that was named after. It's this idea, it goes back to ancient times, medieval times, that there was actually a Wheel of Fortune, and Lady Fortune would spin the wheel that you were on, and you would go up in fortune, and you would go back down, and then if the wheel kept spinning, you go up and down throughout the course of your life. We quoted Hamlet. Hamlet told his best friend Horatio, the nicest compliment that you could give a man back then, and I think it could be said still today, that of all the changes in fortune that went into Horatio's life, he took it all in stride. And he properly balanced emotion with reason, no matter what the circumstance was and no matter what happened, where he was on that wheel of fortune. Ryan Holiday wrote a really nice piece the other day about Teddy Roosevelt. So I got a couple quotes here. Teddy Roosevelt wrote this to his brother. He said, "My happiness is so great, it makes me almost afraid." A couple months later in his diary, he said, this is the night he got married, he said, "Our intense happiness is too sacred to be written about." A couple years later, he said, "I can imagine nothing more happy in life than an evening spent in the cozy little sitting room before a bright fire of soft coal, my books around me, and playing backgammon with my own dainty mistress." That was his wife. The word mistress had a different meaning back then. The next year he said, "I feel now as though I have the reins in my hand." Oh, I love that line. I feel as if I have the reins in my hand. And his daughter was born just after that. Fortune was good for Teddy Roosevelt for a while. 2 years after that, his mom died of typhoid fever, and his wife died of kidney failure the same day in the same house. Here's his diary entry on that day. It's just a huge X. He said, "The light has gone out of my life." Life can come at you fast. Lady Fortune can spin that wheel. How many plans did you have before any of this happened? I had business plans, travel plans. I had speeches to give. We had a lot going on. So did you. And now, nothing. I got nothing going on. Ryan Holiday said in December, the Dow was like 28,000. Things were so good that people were complaining about the war on Christmas and debating the skin color of Santa Claus. In January, the Dow was over 29,000, and people were outraged about the recent Oscar nominations. How stupid does all that seem? The ancient Stoics, they knew that everything in life could be taken from you in an instant. And it's so important to know that, because now you're not if you know that, you won't get all bitter when things are taken away from you. You won't get bitter with life's not fair. I think I told this the other day. It was the first time I had a real job and made real money, and the government took it all away. It was my first real income tax where the government was like, "Oh, you have money now. It's ours. That's our money. Thank you very much." And I called my dad. I was frantic. What's going on? And he said, "You're not a man yet." He said, "You're not a man because you haven't lost all your money yet." I've told that story before. You're not a man because you haven't lost all your money yet. The yet part, as if that's just that's a part of life. You will lose your money at one point. And it wasn't until he passed away when I found out the true story of that, which is so crazy that I didn't ask him. In that moment, I wasn't like, "Wait, what do you mean? Did you lose all your money before?" How stupid. I never asked that question to him. I didn't get the full story till after he died. The answer was yes, twice. But my dad was never bitter, or he learned not to be bitter and do the whole life's not fair. He knew that it made him a man, and it would make me one. Seneca said, we say that nothing happens to the wise man against his expectation. Such an interesting line. Let me say it again. We say that nothing happens to the wise man against his expectation. It doesn't mean nothing happens. It's nothing that happens that catches him by surprise, because the wise man has considered every possibility of what could happen to him in his life. A wise man understands that life can be good and that life can be hard. And it can happen like that, and you won't be blindsided. I think that's why a lot of people got upset with me in the beginning of this whole thing when I said stuff like, so this is back in March, beginning of March. And I said, you should probably consider going to the grocery store and getting some food for your family for a week or two, because I think people are going to start to panic, and you should probably just jump in front of that. And I got these emails like, you're causing panic, Slater. How dare you? Look at you. You're causing it. You're the problem. I'm like, no. Just considering every possibility and just get in front of it. What are your emotions tied to? What are your emotions tied to? If your emotions are tied to the stock market, good luck. That's exhausting. If your emotions are tied to global death rates, that's not a good idea either. But if you're tied to something more eternal, you're going to be that much better off. That's why Paul said, from prison, by the way, Paul said, I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Doesn't matter. He wrote that from prison. We touched on a theme last week that we're going to really drive home today, that we need to be drown-proof calm like a Navy SEAL. We talked to Dan Crenshaw's new book, Fortitude, and we talked about drown-proofing, this process that Navy SEALs go through. And the whole point of it is to learn, to teach your brain to remain calm. So we need to be drown-proof calm like a Navy SEAL, and agile like John Boyd, the greatest fighter pilot in American history. We need to be calm and agile. We're going to see that from our guest today. We have a logistics expert who has had to deal with getting food from one part of the world to another, which is already a seemingly impossible task on a normal day. Now throw in a global pandemic. But can only be done if you keep calm. There's no way, if you're panic-stricken and inflexible, that would ever work, that you could ever fix the problem of a pandemic in a supply chain. We're going to talk to a restaurant owner who has come up with really creative ways to keep his restaurant open and keep his employees paid. You can't be creative unless you're calm. And of course, agile implies creativity, right? And also we're going to talk to a high school principal who did something special for his students. Again, calm and agile. The people who made it out of phase one, the better, are the people who did this well, right? People who had the growth mindset, not a fear mindset, but a growth mindset. It's going to be similar, because you're going to notice that with the guests we're talking to today, that they had a growth mindset. They had to. The question is, I should say this. There's going to be something else that these guests have in common too. They all focus on serving others. They all focus on serving others. Pandemics are nothing new. We don't have time right now. I want to get to the guests, but next week on the show, we're going to talk about how people survive pandemics. Hundreds of years ago, particularly, I want to talk about a pandemic in the year 700, and they did it with joy. It was a miserable, terrible time, a plague way worse than COVID, but they did it with joy, and I'll prove that coming up. In one story, there was a man who lost everything except his life, and he got a visit from Lady Wisdom in the story. And she says, enough with your self-pity. Maybe fortune's spoiled you too much, made you soft. One downturn in your fortune and you're angry? One? Lady Fortune has spun the wheel for all these years and you've ended up on top, and one time you're down and you're angry at her? Not us. Calm and agile. If I may, that is the recipe for our road to recovery. Coming up, Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special COVID-19 Road to Recovery. I want to go right to our next guest, Shelby Anderson. She is a strategic supply line specialist at an international logistics company focused on food. It's an awesome business card title right there. Shelby, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Wonderful, wonderful. You are like the person we need to talk to throughout all this. I'm so grateful you're here. Okay, so I have a million questions. Let's just start big picture. What do I and people need to understand about, let's start with, because you're international logistics here. So what do we need to understand about like the global food supply chain that most people don't even think about ever?
So, I mean, that's pretty broad. I'd say you have to start on the fact that we start here in America where we're producing the product, and then we take it outside of America and ship it all over the world. And there's a lot of things that need to go just perfectly in order to get from point A to point B, and sometimes that means adding a point C and D into the equation. So it's extremely volatile on a good day, and during a global pandemic, it can make for a very difficult procedure, but it's possible.
I'm amazed that anything ever gets anywhere, truly. Like every time I go to the grocery store, I was like, how did these bananas get here? Like, that's a miracle. So yeah. Can you pick like any food, and can you like walk us through like how it goes from point A to B to C to D?
Actually, I think it might be better to explain the backstory, to go from how it gets there and work it back to the U.S. because awesome. I think it would give a nicer history. So, for example, when the global pandemic started, we start sending our product out about 25 to 45 days in advance. So you have to imagine you have, say, chicken, for instance, and you put it in a containerized ship, and you have it on the water, and it's traveling all the way to a port to offload in China, right? So you have it get to China, and then later on down the road, there's this global pandemic, so you have these workers quarantined. Well, now you have a congested port. So you have a ton of cargo on its way, all arriving at the port at the same time, and no one is there to offload it. So once it's there, typically it's offloaded, we take the containers, they're empty, and they're loaded with new product, and it's sent back to us. So it's constantly turning containers. When this happened, we had an issue where containers weren't offloaded, and it led to having a shortage and a deficit in containers and equipment overall. And that brings to blank sailings. I'm not sure if you're familiar with blank. So ocean carrier, they have a set schedule when they arrive at a certain point. So they arrive at a port, and then we load the product, right? But if they're not full, they will have what's called a blank sailing, which is they forego the original schedule and postpone it in order to have more demand to put on that one finite date of scheduling. Does that make sense?
No, give me an example if you can.
So say that we have a vessel and it's supposed to arrive on the 18th of May. But they project that the vessel's not going to be full enough to add all the cargo because the demand and the supply chain in the world today is very volatile. So that carrier of the ocean freight carrier will postpone their original ship date of the 20th of May to a later date, and that's then called a blank sailing. So we no longer.
What's the problem with that?
So the problem with that is, in order for us domestically to get product from our warehouses, from our suppliers down to the port and load to this vessel, we have a really small window in order to do so. So if we can't, if we have everything scheduled weeks in advance, and then they have a blank sailing, they tell us at the last minute, now we have a bunch of cargo sitting at the port with no home to go to yet.
Okay.
Process. Does that make sense?
So yeah, that now it does. So where are the biggest bottlenecks in the, like today, would you say? Is it at the ports? Is it at the shipyards? Is it at the destination port? Like, where are the bottlenecks right now?
So for me, and I don't want to speak on behalf of all logistics, but for me, I want to say that the biggest bottleneck originally was at the ports in China. And then after we were able to resolve that and had cargo moving, then the next bottleneck became on equipment, where when we have one container that's supposed to be at point A, but it takes a long time to get to point B, now we have lack of equipment. So that's probably the second bottleneck.
What kind of equipment?
So have you ever seen a cargo vessel and it has a bunch of those little, well, I shouldn't say little, the rectangle containers, and they're large and they're for shipping? You'll see them everywhere, even alongside the highway. So those are containers where we'll put product. And more often than not, you'll have food in that, and they have a plug-in to keep that container frozen. So in that 45-day transit time, that product's frozen the entire time.
So there's a shortage of
containers.
Really? Why?
Well, because the workers this happened everywhere but China, for instance, when they were quarantined, we didn't have as many workers at the port to offload all of those imports. So we had cargo kind of sitting on these vessels, alternating plugins to keep food frozen until we could get enough workers to offload that cargo and send it back to the U.S. to be loaded then again.
Whoa, so it hasn't made it back yet. Those now empty ships haven't made it back to American ports.
Well, they have, but it took a much longer time than normal. And so it kind of had a trickle effect to then eventually affecting us here in the U.S. in our trucking industry.
Okay, sorry, so now let's bring it domestic here. So how does that, I'm just amazing the ripples here. It's unbelievable that it ever works. Okay, so how does that affect our domestic trucking industry?
So for the truckers, if you're used to having this kind of circular cycle that you are getting your truck, you go to the port and you pick up an empty container, you drive it back to a freezer and you load it with supply, and then you bring it back to the port to then load on a vessel. Well, when that equipment isn't turning and the vessels are now vulnerable to having blank sailings, then the trucking industry has to be ready to have less available slots and schedules, less appointments, and therefore not as many truckers have the hours that they're used to putting in on the road.
Amazing. One last question about international, and then I want to get more here. What are some things that we ship abroad that maybe we don't realize? I remember a while back we were talking about tariffs, and I was amazed at how many chicken feet we send to China, for instance. So what are we sending abroad, and why is that essential to our farmers and our economy in America that we do that?
Well, I mean, it's more like what don't we ship? Because we ship so much.
Yeah.
Nearly every part of a chicken we send over there, there's very little byproduct, and we do a great job in the U.S. by making sure that every little inch of the bird would go somewhere for someone then to eat. So you're exactly right that we ship what's called chicken paws and chicken feet to China. A lot of it does go to China and to Asia in general. We even send things called soft knee bones. So everyone's eating everything around the world.
What are soft knee bones?
Exactly what you think they are. The small knee bone chicken. And believe it or not, it takes a long time to fill a case of those because they are so small, about the size of a quarter, I'd say.
No way. Okay, all right, so back to America. So what are some of the big supply chain disruptions that you are seeing now in America to food, and then maybe some that you anticipate coming down the road because you're the expert with this?
So I'd say some of what we anticipated were these shortages of equipment, but we didn't anticipate as many of the blank sailings and the vessels not being there for us to load cargo. I'd say at first that was a big issue, but the container ship companies, like I'm sure they're the big names on the side of the containers like Maersk and MSC and companies like that. Originally, they will charge us with fees if the container stays and it isn't returned to its original point in a certain amount of days.
Okay.
The U.S., the companies have done a great job by allowing us to forego those charges, and they're providing assistance, which is allowing trucks to move more consistently. And I'd say, without those and without America coming together, we would have had this would still be occurring, and we wouldn't have as many truckers on the road today. But those short-term assistances allowed the truckers to continue shipping as normal.
Nice. What's a food shortage you see coming in the future, perhaps?
I think that would be more specific to the suppliers and the farmers around the world. I know that everyone had to kind of contingency plan based on their forecasting and what they expect their customers will need. So I'd say for all meat in general, if they didn't feel like they were going to meet the supply at a certain date, they would slow down production, and that will inevitably affect what we eat domestically and the amount of product available around. So I think it would be hard to put it on one supplier and say, they're going to have a shortage or they're going to be fine, because it's really depends on the actual supplier. I think if you know that you've eaten a certain brand of chicken, that you should find out where their plants are and how they're doing, and if they've reduced production, because then that will anticipate future availability of the product.
Okay. What do you think about this concept? We've talked about it, and then I finally heard the term too big to pivot. This idea that we're just so maximum efficient at our supply lines, which is amazing, but in a time of a pandemic, we're not made to like quickly be agile with it. What do you think of that?
I mean, this is an incredible time we're living in, and I don't think there's a one size fits all answer. And too big to pivot, I could understand that. If you're used to everything going very, very perfectly, then you're in for a rude awakening. I think you have to be ready to adapt and overcome and get ready for straightforward thinking in order to evolve in this unusual time. So I'm sorry.
Do you think, I don't want to put like a loaded word, but like, do you think it's going to get worse, or do you think there's that, like what you just said there, do you think that's going to be true for a long time coming, like a couple months, or do you think these supply chains are coming together pretty quickly back to normal?
I actually think that we're through the worst of it, in my opinion. From what I've been seeing, initially I think it was really hard for us, and now we've adapted. And like I said, a lot of these container ship companies have provided assurances and assistance in the short term that's allowing things to move more like they used to. So I think we're through the rough patch, and hopefully it will get better from here on out, but I still think it will continue, just not as bad as it used to be.
Yeah, okay, that's super helpful. Okay, last question, we got to run, but what's like one crazy fact about shipping and global logistics that we need to know?
Crazy fact. I guess the craziest fact that I didn't know until moving food was just the soft knee bones. Chicken is eaten, and that's insane to me. I would never expect to eat soft knee bones, and then now, lo and behold, a lot of the world eats them. So I guess that's a good fact for me.
Yeah, very good. Shelby Anderson, a strategic supply line specialist at an international logistics food company. Awesome. Shelby, appreciate your insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Now, awesome to know that the worst perhaps is behind us. Love that hope. More coming up on our special COVID-19 Road to Recovery. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special COVID-19 Road to Recovery. So on my local radio show the other day, I think we were talking about Panera maybe, and how they sell groceries, but they don't sell flour. And I was just musing about that. And our next guest called in and he said, I sell flour. So Drew HOFFOS is the chef and owner of Nutmeg Bakery and Cafe in San Diego. They're both right down the street from my house. My wife goes every Sunday on the way to church, which was just random and awesome. So Drew HOFFOS is with us right now. How are you, Drew?
I'm doing well, Mike. Thanks for having me, man.
My pleasure, brother. I loved hearing your story because you are, I think, a perfect example of business owners staying flexible and nimble and creative in the face of all this. And it's those people who are going to survive, hopefully, at the end of it. Before we get into what you're doing, like, take us back to the beginning of it all. Like, what were your first thoughts when the virus came down and the governor said you got to shut down? Like, what were you fearful? Like, what were you even feeling when that first happened?
Yeah, it was super scary because this restaurant provides for myself, my family, my in-laws' family. You know, we have between the two locations over 30 employees. So the first thing I thought is we're going to stay open as long as we can and figure out a way not have to shut down unless it's really dire, because we've got to try and keep this thing alive. There's just too much riding on it, you know. And so we put a lot of effort into, you know, learning as much as we could about it. Starting with the social distancing and everything, we figured out what we were going to need to do to make it work, and then kind of went from there.
I love that you say the 30 employees. I think people who have a negative reaction or a negative vibe against business owners is they're greedy and all that. But every business owner I've talked to, their first, if not their first, like the first or second thought is all the employees and their livelihoods as well. And you mentioned you got 30 people who are counting on you staying open.
All right, yeah, it's incredible. I mean, we know these people. We know their families. That, you know, we're all signing each other's cards for birthdays. I mean, we're a family. It's not a business to us. It's a family, and so that's what makes the stakes so much higher. It's not just it's not just a bunch of numbers. It's people. It's lives. So yeah, it's super important to us.
With small business owners, especially. Okay, so tell us some of the things you guys have done to stay open and help serve people in this time.
Totally. So the main one would be the essential groceries. We didn't really have the idea for it. Some of people from the community just asked us. They said, "Hey, do you sell flour? Do you have yeast? Do you get eggs? I don't want to stand in line at the grocery store and pick up a box of eggs that somebody else is picking up and putting back down." And a light bulb kind of went on, like, yeah, stupid. You've got bags of flour sitting in the back of your shop, and none of your wholesale accounts are ordering pastries. Why don't we divide it up and sell it? So that's what we started doing, and every single day we just added more items. You know, now I think we've got over 60 things on our website that we're selling.
Cool.
Yeast, flour, to butter, sugar, eggs, jam, sliced turkey, sliced salami, bread. You know, chipotle aioli. People love our chipotle aioli we make from scratch. So we sell it. You know, local honey. We have a guy brings us local honey and avocados. We're selling those. Orange juice, cold brew. You know, everything we can think of that people have told us they want, we're putting online and trying to sell. And we're able to get it.
Love that.
So that's the main.
I know we've talked.
Go ahead.
I was going to say we talked a lot about like the supply lines and how they're super efficient but not very flexible. So there may be enough flour or yeast, but we don't have like the proper packaging to send it to grocery stores. But so how many pounds of flour do you guys get shipped to you?
We get it in 50-pound bags, and so I'll order, you know, 4 or 5 of each type of flour. We're a bakery, so we have cake flour, pastry flour, bread flour, AP flour, gluten-free flour. So we have all these different types of flour, and so, you know, we could order 4 or 5 bags of each at a time, and, you know, have 700, 800 pounds of flour come.
Wow. So you just split it up. You split it up into little bags. Are there any legal or like regulations that the county or the state are like, oh, you can't even do that?
So at the very beginning, it was kind of the Wild West. It was kind of just do whatever you want. And funny you should ask. We got approached by the Department of Agriculture for our eggs. The eggs, we didn't have a sticker on them, and so I reached out to our egg supplier up in Ramona, Bernice and Luis, from Evan Hazer Ranch, and they forwarded me the stickers that they use when they sell their eggs at retail, and so now we're including that on the egg. So Yeah. there are
What does
some
what does the
compliance.
sticker say?
It's crazy. Of course, it's government stuff. The font that says the size of the egg has to be bold, and it has to be bigger than 1¼ inches.
Oh, come on.
You know what I
You
mean?
serious?
It has to. Oh, I swear to God, it has to say CASES compliant. Has to have the date that they were harvested, the date you have to eat them by. But it's all specific, of course. It's got to be the right size and the right shape, and so now that's on every single dozen of eggs we sell. So we're doing what we
how
can to
lame.
comply.
No, and I'm grateful you guys are, and I'm grateful for Evan Hazel. Those guys are awesome up there. That they would have those and give those to you or sell them or whatever. But what if they didn't, and the county is like, oh, can't provide these eggs to people who need eggs because you don't have this sticker? Like, how ridiculous.
Right.
The other idea I love what you guys did is you're making these boxes. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so the dinner boxes are a fun way for folks to kind of break the routine, the monotony of regular dinner time. So we do 2 versions. We have some on our site that are like a DIY type situation. So you would get ingredients in a box, and all of the ingredients for that meal are in that box. So instead of going to the grocery store and finding out that they're out of something and having to change on the fly, this box just has everything. So you open it up, there's instructions, you cook it, kind of like a Blue Apron style thing. Then the second box would be, we have basically ready to go meals that are just eat and serve. So if you're less hands-on, you just want to, we're doing a meatless meatloaf on Mondays for Meatless Mondays, since, there's word of a big meat shortage coming. So trying to expose people to some vegetarian stuff just in case the meat apocalypse happens. And then we've got on Tuesdays, we do a quiche dinner, 2 types of quiche, roasted potatoes, and a salad. So stuff that you can just pick up, throw in the oven and be done, or kind of be more hands-on if you like.
Yeah, I love that. You guys have totally changed your business model. Like, that's
Great.
so awesome. So when you were on the other day on the show, the radio show, I got an email from another restaurant owner, and he said, I'm not going to turn into a grocery store. I don't know why. He didn't give an argument, right? I don't know if it was like pride or inability. I don't know.
Yeah.
But what do you say to that?
Like I said before, it's about keeping the place open for our employees, for our families. It's really hard to start this thing again. We have to keep it moving. We got to keep these people paid and try and keep them with a livelihood. We lost one of our bakers. She moved back to Tennessee because we had all of our wholesale accounts going. All of those restaurants and cafes and coffee shops shut down. And so we only had enough work for 2 out of our 3 bakers. And she moved back to Tennessee. These are talented people that are now gone from the San Diego food scene. We were losing a great baker who's now in Tennessee because she had to go back and live with her folks because she couldn't provide. So, what I say to people who are closing is you got to think about the effects of what's going to happen in the long term and how that affects everything. It's all an ecosystem. As soon as I start losing cooks who are sitting at home, they don't have 2 months of savings. They can't sit around in San Diego with the rents here and just hang out and wait this thing out. So, we made a decision. We're going to do whatever we can to stay open.
How's that twofold? How's the cash flow been coming in so far, all things considered, of course? And what are your prospects for the future? Like, what have you heard about how things are going to open up, et cetera?
So, we're down business-wise, some days 70%, some days 45, 50%.
Wow.
Overall, things are, from what I hear, we're doing better than most. We've spoken with our landlords and things like that. They've told us that we can push our rent out a little. AT&T and Cox have lowered our bills. So we've been working with people to try and lower the impact and stuff. We hear that it looks like we are going to get a PPP loan, which would be huge. That would keep all of our folks paid. So, we're crossing our fingers. It's been really clunky. The rollout just took too long. But we're just staying positive, crossing our fingers, and hoping that it all works out.
Biggest piece of advice to other business owners or customers?
Piece of advice: wash your hands. And man, just stay positive and just realize that it could be way worse. You know, we're trying to solve problems that are terrible, but they're not life and death. They're, you know, we're really lucky here. So, you know, as hard as this is, as hard as it has been, there's places that have it so much worse. So keep your head up, you know, and grind forward and find a way to make it work. You know, we'll get through it. It's, you know, this is not an impossible thing. We've done harder stuff before.
Yeah, there is an end to this. There is. And I hope you guys, and I hope many other good people like you, good businesses like yours can make it to the end. Drew, super grateful, man. Let's check in a couple weeks as things change, maybe as things are opening up a bit,
Totally.
and see how you're adapting there, because I know you will. Drew HOFFOS, Nutmeg Bakery and Cafe here in San Diego. Good to talk to you, Drew. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you so much, Mike.
COVID-19 road to recovery. More coming up. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special COVID-19 Road to Recovery. I want to end the show with this story right here of Verdi Montgomery. And Verdi's with us right now. Mr. Montgomery, how are you, sir?
I'm doing really well, sir. Thank you for asking.
My pleasure. I'm glad you're here. So, Mr. Montgomery is the principal of Wiley High School. Go Pirates! Sir, before we get to the main story here, why did you want to become a principal in the first place?
Well, in all honesty, I didn't really want to be a principal. I had reached that point in my career where I wanted a promotion of some sort, and just in education, that just seemed to be the natural place to go. So I thought I'd give it a try.
How have you made the most of it?
Well, when I originally thought about it, you know, every principal I'd ever seen was, you know, pretty autocratic and dictatorial kind, and that's just not my style. So I figured out if I can do it some other way, then I'd be happy to do it. So that's the way I've chosen to do it.
Give me some examples of that different style.
I am more of a relational kind of person. I want to meet people, get to know people, see what makes them tick, and bring values into what we do, rather than just manage a store kind of thing that I had seen a lot of in the past with my teaching experience.
You know, kids, high school kids in particular, and college kids, but high school kids, get a pretty bad rap these days, Principal. What do you see in kids of this generation that gives you some hope?
Well, I will just tell you that having been in it now 43 years, and I've seen them go from, in the last 43 years, the changes that have been made. And I want to tell you today, they're some of the most creative people. We're asking kids to do more today than we've ever done in the history of education. I graduated high school with 18 credits and did okay with it, but we're asking kids to graduate with 26 credits now. And we just assume they know more when they get here. And the other thing I really think stands out with kids today, they are more acceptable and tolerant of each other and the things in society than they ever have been. And I love that.
What do you think inspires kids these days, or what makes kids tick that you're able to tap into as a principal all the time?
Well, the one thing that drives kids is their friends. They are the most friend-oriented bunch of people around, and they love their friends. They love hanging out with their friends, and you take that away from them, and that's when you have issues. And that's what this thing has done for us right now with this pandemic.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't, obviously, as we finish this conversation, we're not, of course, downplaying any of the, deaths, serious illnesses, and difficult things there. But it is also difficult to be isolated from people, and especially as you said, if you're a kid and that's like your main life source are your friends and doing fun things when you're a high schooler. So, sir, when did you guys decide to cancel? Well, really, the rest of school, including graduation and all the other big events at the end of the year.
Well, it happened kind of in a routine. When we first came down, we were in spring break when it all happened. And we just decided to extend spring break another week. Now, when that got out, that was really positive news for the kids. They thought, hey, another week, this is okay. But then about halfway through that week, we moved it to May the 4th. We were supposed to come back like today. And that kind of, the seniors really started noticing that. And they're worried about it. Now they became worried, are we even going to finish and this, that, and the other. We held out hope And we were going to come back today, May the 4th, dressed up in Star Wars things and do the May the 4th be with you and all that. But then along the way, they canceled it for the whole year. And that's when the seniors really hit the floor and their emotions got involved. And we're a very, very tradition-laden school. And we have a lot of things in May that they're going to miss. Prom, our senior walk, which is a major issue for our school, and things of that nature. And of course, they were popping graduation in there. We think we're going to be able to have some form of graduation program. But when you put all that in there, it was a really hard thing for those kids to take.
It's so funny. I was just reminiscing with my wife the other day about high school. She loved high school. I was so about high school. She loved high school. She was telling me about all the traditions that they did. But what's the senior walk? Just so we can all reminisce on our maybe fun high school memories.
Well, at Wiley High School, we do a day where our kids dress up in cap and gown, and we take them to all the elementary schools in our district that are in our feeder pattern. And they walk through the elementary schools. Of the elementary school, most of them went to when they were in elementary. And then that takes place till about lunch. That's how long that takes. And then we get back to lunch and we line them up in our cafeteria. And we put our class of the officers of the National Honor Society and our Valensal at the front of the line. And we do a senior walk through the whole building in cap and gown to the fight song and plays through that. It takes about 40 minutes to do it. All the kids come out in the hallway and watch, and the seniors just walk their way from one end of the building to the other and around it and through it. And then again, 40 minutes. And and then from there, they're pretty much done for the day. We tell them to go take care of their cap and gown. And it's something to look forward to. It's something every senior has seen every other class get to do. And this class doesn't get to do that.
Yeah, that's a good thing you do there, sir. I think that's a great tradition. Okay, so tell me what you decided to do the other day.
Well, we had done some things. We had one of our students came up with Harper Cummings came up with a really cool slogan, and he just did it. He posted it, and he said, we're the class of 2020. We're the class that's supposed to have vision, but we sure didn't see this coming. So we printed up a T-shirt for that, and we gave it to them whenever they picked up their cap and gown. We gave that T-shirt to them. Our school board has gotten together and made a senior sign for every senior in the whole district. We have 2 high schools. That's about 1,000 signs. And they had our transportation department deliver it. So we were doing some things, but on a personal level, and I told the kids right off, this is really not for you. This is for me. I mean, I want to call a senior meeting. I want to talk to you guys about graduation. I want to talk to you about all those things we normally do and just say things to you here at the end of the year. And I can't do it. I mean, y'all are all at home. So next best thing, if I can't see you, then if you can't come to me, then I'm going to go to you. So that's what I did.
What'd you do? I
devised a card, and I wanted to go just make contact with them, say hi, ask them how they were doing, making sure they got their cap and gown, and ask them how the online learning was going, just if there's anything I can do for them. So I had my secretary draw up. We have Google Maps for our senior class, and there's 612 of them, and it was 17 pages of Google Map directions. And I got my wife. We got in the car the first day. In my head, I thought I could do this in like a couple of 3 days. But after the first day, I realized this is going to take a while. And I filled up a tank of gas that morning. And I'm that guy that resets all the buttons. And when I drive, I have all these little mind games that motivate me to go. So at the end of the day, we got home. We'd done 30-something houses that day. And I looked at my gas tank. I'd gone 67 miles. And I said, wow, that's just up one street down the other. And that's how long it took. So then I started measuring all that. So at the end, it took me 12 days, 79 hours, and just over 800 miles to get that in.
That's great. What were the kids' reaction? What was one of your favorite reactions when you got there, surprised the kids?
Well, there's 612 of them, and I actually saw probably around 500 of them because some of them weren't home or they were working or whatever they were doing. And if they weren't home, I either had somebody at the house stand in for them, whether it was mom, dad, sibling, or grandparent even. And or if they weren't there at all, I'd put the card in their mailbox just to show them I had been to their house. And the reaction was just as you would expect it across the gambit. I mean, I had everybody that was wanting to hug. You can't hug because you had to be 6 feet apart. You had those that, well, he's here. That's good. Let's get him out of the way, and I'll go about doing whatever it was I was doing, and all the emotion in between. But it was mostly just very positive. Kids were glad I came by, and we had a moment, and it was good to see them. And for me, it was just one of the most rewarding things. When I see them at school, I see them playing games. I see them at choir concerts, band concerts, and plays, and everything they're doing. But when you see them in their own environment, their own home, it's just a different level. It's a different level of personal involvement, and it meant a lot to me to get to do it.
Yeah, that's good. Well done, Principal. Last question. What's your message to these seniors as they go out into the world?
Message to them as
And
they
look
go out
back
into
on
the
this
world.
time.
Yeah, the message to them as they go off into the world, which it is every year, is just give your best. You're prepared. We've got them ready. They know what they're doing, and they all have goals and aspirations, and I want them to give the best. But from a personal level, I just want to know that we're cared about. And we love them, we care about them. They're always going to be Wily Pirates, and they're always going to be AMO, and this is who they are, and we're just glad they're here.
Great stuff. Wiley High School, Verdi Montgomery, Principal Montgomery. Well done, sir. Thanks for being here.
You bet. Thank you for having me.
Good stuff. All right, Slater Crusaders. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Road to recovery. My name is Mike Slater. We'll be back on Monday. Spread the word.